This is Automated Thought.
Well, my friends, here we are at the end of the year 2016. Things have happened recently that I never, ever thought would happen. For one thing, I saw the new Ghostbusters movie. You know, the one that I railed against earlier this year. The one with the ladies. I saw it. I saw it kind of by accident. The Drunken Peasants, Paul and TJ, they were doing like a riff tracks on it. And so I decided to watch it. And their commentary was okay. It wasn't particularly funny or insightful. The fact is, the first time you see this movie, it's a lot like watching a locomotive roll through an elementary school and crush about 100 children. There's not much to say about it except, oh God, why? But after watching their commentary, I thought, you know what? I should see the movie for real. I might want to make a video about it. So I mentioned it to my brother, and he said, yeah, get it on Redbox. I want to see how dumb it is. So I rented it. And while I was watching it with my brother, I realized something. The movie that I thought wasn't good, it was even worse because the riff tracks that they did was on the extended cut. And I was watching the theatrical cut, and pretty much anything that was even remotely good or interesting seems to have been cut out of the theatrical cut. Just like with Batman and Superman, whoever made the final edit of this movie is a blithering retard. The extended edition was actually better. There were these little moments that I wanted to use in my video, like this one.
Fuck you.
And that wasn't in the theatrical cut. I could not believe it. So then, in order to make this video, I had to rent it again. I rented the extended edition and watched it. So what I'm telling you is that in the last week, I've seen Ghostbusters 3 times. Wow. And now that I've had time to digest the thing, I have some thoughts that I'd like to share with you. Let's go on this journey together, shall we? Whee!
This movie is exactly what the preview promised.
Back during the Ghostbusters controversy, people said, what if the preview is shit? That doesn't mean the movie is shit, right? I would have to say that the movie is exactly as I expected it to be. It was a middle-of-the-road, wacky comedy starring 4 women who hunt ghosts. If you had made this exact movie using the 3 original living actors, Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, and Ernie Hudson, and had them doing these exact same jokes, it would still be horrible. And the fact that it has some ladies in it, well, it's actually probably a little better than if it was the 3 old guys, because then they'd be saying, oh, I'm getting too old for this shit. And then I would feel bad for them, and then I'd be angry and sad. There's nothing worse than a shitty sequel, so I guess if this movie had to be a turd, at least it's a fresh turd. The blame for this movie's failure, I place it entirely upon the mincing little shoulders of Paul Feig. I mean, from the opening scene, his weird social justice agenda is front and center. The way the wormy little tour guide who's giving the tour of the mansion, he mentions that this is where P.T. Barnum had the idea of enslaving elephants. Oh God, that's so stupid. Elephants were enslaved long before P.T. Barnum was even born. You ever heard of this country called India? And then, right after that, there's the little part about how Lord Aldridge was upset and furious because his breakfast wasn't ready when he woke up. How like a man. As soon as I heard this guy talk, I knew this movie was going to be trouble. And the stuff that drags down this movie is Paul Feig's, he has this love of stuff that's not comedy, it's not jokes. It's just sort of awkward yammering. Like, take a look at this.
That book was our baby, and you abandoned that baby before it even learned to fly.
Okay, well, books can't fly, and neither can babies, so...
You don't know. I'll tell you what, if I had a human baby that would fly, I would be telling the press about it. If I had a flying baby, I'd zip it.
Or how about this gem?
My concern is, I feel like The cat is sort of already kind of out of the bag.
I think what they're saying is the cat is out of the bag. They want us to put the cat back inside the bag.
No, I know that's what they're saying, but I'm saying the cats are already out, so it's hard to put the cat back in the bag. But that's why they have that saying, because if the cat is out of the bag, you can't put it back in the bag.
I put a cat in the bag all the time.
But once the cat is out of the bag, aren't you like, oh, the cat is out of the bag?
We just want to shove that damn cat back.
Do you get it? It's funny because it's not at all. And now I will give credit where credit is due. I really like this line reading.
What?
Yeah, I can use that in videos. That is awesome. Yeah.
Rowan is a really weird villain.
You know, one of the most valid criticisms about this movie that very few people can deny is that the villain is a kind of weak and underdeveloped. I mean, we've gone from Gozer the Destructor and Vigo the Carpathian to Rowan North, a weird, angry little fat man who works in a hotel and who builds ghost machines. Once you see this villain, it's kind of impossible not to notice that he's an angry, basement-dwelling virgin loser. He's basically exactly the type of person who Paul Feig accused of not liking the movie. Now, that either shows a good deal of prescience on Paul Feig's part. He may have gone into this knowing that he was gonna piss off white dudes. If that's not the case, maybe they did some reshoots between the controversy and the film's release. They may have had just enough time for that. I mean, crazier things have happened. Either way, the whole character is basically a big middle finger to the 35-year-old white male fan of the original Ghostbusters. You're sad, you're a loser. You can still buy a ticket to this movie, but fuck you anyway. But that's not the weirdest thing about him. The weirdest thing about him is just, well, everything about him. His plan, what he does, and how he does it, and why he does it. He's just basically there to be a villain. He summons ghosts and he turns into a big monster at the end. But when you really think about it, it's kinda crazy because his entire motivation is that he's a loser who doesn't get women and he's been laughed at. But then, look what he's capable of. He literally creates devices that summon spirits from the other side of the afterlife. Remember, in the world of this movie, ghosts are just rumors that no one really believes in except for crazy people. But Rowan, on his own, single-handedly, has answered one of the most important fundamental questions of human existence. Is there life after death? And the answer is yes. His devices, they prove this. It's the most important discovery ever. And his technology seems really reliable. It certainly seems to be far more advanced than the stuff that the 4 Ghostbusters come up with. If Rowan had stopped to think about it, he could have become one of the most famous people in the entire world. This little creepy bastard could be shaking hands with the president and the Pope. Why doesn't he do that? I guess you could make the argument that the ghosts were infecting his mind and feeding him bad juju or something, to the point where all his thoughts were on death and revenge. But still, if you were sitting on a discovery like that, you could really use it to your advantage. Instead, he takes a gamble on killing himself, which allows him to return as a super powerful ghost that has powers that none of the other ghosts seem to have. Why is that? The other ghosts are just kind of like these rampaging, angry lunatics. But Rowan, he has full control of his faculties. He can effortlessly possess people and control them, and once he breaks the barrier, he seems to have an unlimited power to change his own form, to grow into a giant city-smashing monster. Why does he have all this good stuff? I mean, why didn't he think that if he killed himself, he might have just turned into just one ghost among millions, just a little, helpless lost soul in the torrent of evil ghostness? Did Satan promise him all this power? I mean, what is the deal here? It just happens automatically. All in all, it worked out well for him, or at least it did, until the Ghostbusters shot him in the dick with lasers and he got sucked down into the portal to hell, where he'll probably have to watch this movie on repeat for all of eternity. But still, his plan it seemed to really work out for him. Why is that? The reason, of course, is that Paul Feig didn't really put much thought into it. He just wanted to have a cartoon villain to be villainous and turn into a big thing at the end, just because that's what movies need now. He should have gotten Dan Aykroyd's help on this. Dan Aykroyd actually believes in ghosts.
Chris Hemsworth's character is too stupid to be real.
You know, a lot of people were criticizing Thor in this movie. They were saying that his character, Kevin, the dim-witted, handsome secretary, was too stupid. And he is. His IQ is like that of a retarded child. Now, overall, I think he's kind of a standout in the film. Who gets tired of Thor? He's an awesome presence. The god of thunder. He's an excellent dancer. He seems to have a fun and interesting life. He recognizes a cool hat when he sees one. But the thing is, I don't think this character is actually stupid, and I can't believe that no one else brought this up. I mean, remember the scene when he asks the Ghostbusters if he can bring his cat to work, and then you find out that his cat is a dog named Mike Hat? No, that's so convoluted and so implausible. That's not something that an actual stupid person would ever do. I am thoroughly convinced that Thor's secretary, I'm convinced that he's actually a brilliant scammer and that he is trolling the Ghostbusters. I would imagine that this is how he truly lives his life. He uses his stunning good looks to bamboozle middle-aged women. He pretends to be a moron. He gradually tests his limits to see what they will and will not believe. And then once he finds a target, he just cruises through life, working some easy job where he doesn't put forth any effort and takes off whenever he wants. Maybe he had a grander scheme to embezzle their money or take all the credit for their ghost busting. It just never got off the ground because he spent the whole last of the movie being possessed by Rowan. But I'm pretty sure he was scheming on something because he wasn't just stupid, he was unbelievably stupid to the point that no one actually is. Am I crazy here? Wow. Just look at him go. Thor, you are too awesome for this movie, man.
The senseless death of Dr. Martin Heist.
The very fact that Bill Murray was coerced into doing this movie is bad enough, but what's way worse is what happens to his character. Murray plays Dr. Martin Heist, a famous paranormal debunker, which automatically makes him a bad guy because, demanding evidence for outlandish claims automatically makes someone, a big meanie. Anyway, in his one big scene in the movie, he comes to visit the Ghostbusters to see if they actually have a ghost, as they claim. That's when something really fucked up happens. Despite the frantic pleadings of her teammates, Erin Gilbert, the heroine of the movie, recklessly opens up a ghost trap, releasing a gigantic ghost, which throws Dr. Heist out of a window into his death. This is an unbelievably careless and despicable move. Now, it's been a hot decade since I saw the original Ghostbusters movies, but I don't remember a part where Egon or Ray lost their temper because someone was poo-pooing their claims, and so they opened a trap to blast someone in the face and kill them out of anger and vengeance. That would have been an extremely unheroic thing to do. Not only does Erin show no remorse, but she and the other Ghostbusters seem completely oblivious to the seriousness of the situation. I mean, look at this. This police officer, he's about to book her on murder 1, which no doubt she could have gotten argued down to negligent manslaughter with a good lawyer, but her and her teammates don't even take it seriously. They just sit there and blather on about Patrick Swayze movies. Oh, Roadhouse, I like Roadhouse, that's a good one, yeah. What the fuck? Don't they realize that Dr. Heist probably had a family? That if Erin wanted so badly to prove that this ghost was real, that she could have made some sort of effort to take it to a controlled environment instead of right there at that moment near a window. And remember, this wasn't a little cute ghost like a Slimer or something. This was a giant 20-foot tall demonic dragon. And she just decided, no, this asshole doesn't believe, I'm gonna blast him in the face. I mean, of course she didn't know it was going to kill him, but she knew it was going to be extremely dangerous. Good God. And then, the only reason why she isn't arrested is because the government agents come and save her. That's right. This woman recklessly killed someone in an emotional outburst, and then she's saved from punishment by a couple of men. Are you sure this movie isn't the one who's actually sexist? Wee, she's flying.
Who exactly is this movie even for?
I suppose when Paul Feig was pitching this movie to the studio, they had a very simple calculus. They figured everyone who likes the old Ghostbusters movies would come see this one, and then they'd also get the audience that normally goes to Paul Feig's more chick flickish movies, like Bridesmaids and The Heat. And with those two audiences combined, you would have a blockbuster on your hands. Instead, both audiences kinda stayed home for the most part, and the movie didn't make a lot of money. When I was watching this movie, it seemed like the kind of thing that would only appeal to feminist hipsters. People who are just in love with the concept of taking something that used to belong to men and turning it into something that belongs to women. The action and the ghosts are all very cartoony, and it's not the kind of thing that really appeals to adults. But it's also not really for kids either. When this movie came out, I remember reading a bunch of really desperate reviews on liberal websites claiming that the reviewer's 9-year-old daughter was head over heels in love with this movie, and that she and her friends were building their own proton packs and making their own jumpsuits and running around playing Ghostbusters all day, not realizing that this simple joy was denied to previous generations of women who could only play Janine while the boys had all the fun. I kinda call bullshit on all that. If any reviewer's daughter liked this movie, it was for about a minute. They were just, their mom asked them if they liked the movie, and they were like, yeah, it was pretty good, and they said, great, I'm gonna use that in my review. The younger generation looks up to this movie because, okay, if you said that your 9-year-old daughter was obsessed with Queen Elsa, or Judy Hopps, or Garnet, or Cora, or Ronda Rousey, that I would believe. Those are characters that kids like. But most of the Ghostbusters, at least 3 of them, are just kinda these middle-aged career women. I want tenure! I want more wontons in my soup! The only character that a kid could really fall in love with is Holtzman. I think everyone likes Holtzman just a little bit. I like Holtzman. I love Holtzman, mostly just because I like Kate McKinnon. She's magical. And if even one little girl, just one, saw this movie and then said to herself,
Emily, why are you looking up to Taylor Swift and Beyonce and all these rich bougie bitches? They don't know how I live. Man, I want to be more like Holtzman. I want to cut my hair short and wear some goggles and like a jumpsuit and some paint spattered overalls, or maybe a wacky suit with a tie and stuff, and I'll just go around not giving a shit what anybody thinks. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do next year when I start 9th grade. I'm going to pretend like I'm Holtzman and I won't give a fuck. I'll just rock out in their faces, bitch. Yeah.
If even one girl did that, then I guess it's all worth it. And a lot of people, like when Paul and TJ were watching this movie, they got in the mode of bashing everything that I don't think they could appreciate the few things that were good in the movie. The action at the end, while extremely colorful and cartoony, it wasn't bad. I mean, hey, let's watch Holtzman do the most badass thing in the whole movie. Are you ready?
Let's go.
You.
Yeah! That's fucking awesome. I love you, Holtzman.
Is this a good, bad movie?
Wee! Wee! By the 3rd time I watched this movie, I kind of felt myself softening towards it. I don't know what it was. I just didn't dislike it as much as I did at the beginning of this process. Sure, it's kind of a bad movie, but it became lovable somehow. It's like a sad, limping little puppy that you see on the side of the road. I guess for me, the sting of it wasn't as great as it would be for other people, because I'm not terribly emotionally invested in the Ghostbusters universe. Like, if they made another shitty Batman movie, I would be pissed. But Ghostbusters? Take it or leave it. And hey, if you're a social justice warrior, and you like this movie despite its flaws, if the fact that it's just passable, that combined with the fact that it stars a bunch of women who are allowed to be gross and funny and do stuff, if that's enough for you, then hey, I can't take that away from you. No one can. You go ahead and like this movie. I mean, I like Suicide Squad, and that's a very hard movie to defend on any sort of rational or critical level. I just love it, okay? It's got Harley Quinn. I love Harley Quinn, and one day I'm gonna marry her. The one thing you're not allowed to do is to claim that this movie is somehow of such obvious and sterling quality that any criticism of it must stem from internalized misogyny. That's just ludicrous. You know this movie's not that good. Ultimately, I think this movie is the good kind of bad movie. I honestly think this movie is bad enough, but also interesting enough to join The Phantom Menace and Batman and Robin in the holy trinity of ridiculous stinkers that are still so interesting that we feel like talking about them. I mean, it's been 18 years, and people are still coming up with theories about Jar Jar Binks. So even though this movie's bad, there's something there. It's worth discussing. I've been talking about it for like a half an hour now. I wouldn't do that with a truly bad film. The truly bad movies are the ones that are forgettable, like Run All Night, starring Liam Neeson, The Battle of Los Angeles, and Non-Stop, starring Liam Neeson. Nobody talks about those movies because there is literally not a single interesting thing about them. Ghostbusters is bad, but it's an interesting kind of bad. And I will give credit where credit is due. I would rather watch Ghostbusters again than that shitty 2014 version of RoboCop, which is so stupid and boring, it's just pointless. And I'd rather watch Ghostbusters than that shitty remake of Conan, starring Aquaman, Khal Drogo. And I can already hear a feminist thinking,
Well, how come those movies weren't booed before they came out? How come you just let those pass, but then you had to make a stink about Ghostbusters just because there were women in it, right?
no, not necessarily. I was making a stink about RoboCop before it came out because I thought it was going to be pointless, and it was. And come on, be honest. How many internet feminists were closely monitoring the audience reaction to Conan or RoboCop? None of them. You don't see something unless you're looking for it. Plus, just to be fair, it's harder to tell ahead of time if an action-adventure movie is going to be bad, rather than a comedy. If you just see pictures of RoboCop running around and shooting at people, you can't tell just from the preview if that's going to be good or bad, or if there's anything there at all. Action is pretty generic. But with Ghostbusters, when you see Leslie Jones slapping the shit out of Melissa McCarthy and screaming that the power of Patty compels her, something like that, you can tell right away whether it appeals to you. There's no mystery there. So hey, Ghostbusters fans, yeah, it sucks for you that there's not going to be a sequel. I could stand to see more of Holtzman myself. They should give her her own spin-off movie. But look at it this way. A lot of cult classic films that we enjoy today were box office flops. It's a Wonderful Life was a box office flop. Lots of other movies were. The Rocky Horror Picture Show was some kind of weird disaster of a movie that somehow fluked itself into becoming one of the most viewed films of all time. So I encourage all fans of Ghostbusters to rally around it and make it a future cult classic. If you really think that Ghostbusters should be a thing, then make it a thing. If a bunch of cross-dressing drug addicts can make the Rocky Horror Picture Show an enduring part of popular culture, then surely you can do the same. If there's actually an entire generation of young girls who adore this movie, then I expect to hear people say, You just got Holtzman'd, baby! Ah! Long into the future. You know what one of my favorite movies of all time is? The Legend of Billie Jean. This was a small-budget movie that was released in 1985. It was in theaters for 2 weeks before being declared a failure and disappearing. But then, somehow, it started to gain an audience on cable. And I was very surprised a couple of years ago to discover that it had been released on Blu-ray. I never thought that would happen. Feminists, keep in mind, this is a movie about a punky girl who fights back against her would-be rapist and spends most of the movie smashing dudes in the nuts. She's like a superhero whose main power is to smash guys in the nuts when they get fresh with her. Go check it out. It's a great movie. If you Ghostbusters fans work hard enough, then maybe in 20 years, we'll be watching Ghostbusters the same way that we watched The Legend of Billie Jean. Or Zardoz. Zardoz is a bad movie, but I love it. And if you do decide to preserve this movie for antiquity, make sure that it's the extended cut. The extended cut should be the one that becomes remembered. I mean, look at this scene of Melissa McCarthy projectile vomiting slime all over the bathroom. Why would you cut this out of the movie? This is an essential part of the movie, and cutting it out is just absolutely stupid. God. Fuck it.
These 80s reboots in general are fucking lame.
If the fans of this new Ghostbusters movie don't succeed in making it a thing, and it ends up going the way of Ninja Turtles 2 Out of the Shadows, has that even come out yet? Then Ghostbusters 2016 will no doubt join a long rogues gallery of completely unnecessary reboots. How many of these horrible reboots have we had recently? Friday the 13th, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, Point Break, Total Recall? They've all been forgotten while the originals live on. That Rocky Horror reboot on television? Forgotten. Now, there's nothing wrong with continuing a story. Making some sort of sequel or soft reboot usually works a lot better. The Force Awakens and Tron Legacy are both movies that I love. They bring back as much of the old as possible, but then move the story forwards. And when you bring back a beloved actor like Jeff Bridges or Harrison Ford and give their characters a worthy send-off, that's great. But dumping Dan Aykroyd in a cab and have him say some cheap catchphrase in a highly contrived manner, that's just cheap and pointless. Sadly, these 80s reboots are going to continue. And don't get me wrong, there are some stories that can and should be told over and over again. There's always going to be another story about King Arthur, or Jesus Christ, or Batman. But Hollywood is so desperate for ideas at this point that they're rebooting movies that are very specific and very of their time. Ghostbusters is a very 80s-ish thing. I mean, think about it this way. Imagine if the original Ghostbusters had never existed. Can you imagine Ghostbusters 2016 being made today? Can you imagine a scenario where Paul Feig says, "Hey, I have an original idea. I'm going to create a workplace comedy about 4 women who hunt ghosts using scientific contraptions. And it's going to be called The Sisters of Spooktical City." That just wouldn't happen, would it? It's just not an idea that would really stand on its own. Without the original to lean off of, it just would never have happened. The supporters of Ghostbusters, they like to say that people are just blinded by nostalgia, that we only like what was in our childhoods and that we're not open-minded or intellectually curious enough to fairly examine the reboots. Now, in some cases that's true, but it's impossible to deny that the mechanics of movie making have changed. Back in the 80s, movies were still made on kind of an auteur level, even if many of these directors would never be snooty enough to describe themselves as auteurs. Movies like Ghostbusters and Gremlins and, stuff like that, they were usually the product of a singular filmmaker who had an idea that he got a studio to put up money for. Now, the studios just take a big chunk of cash, hire someone, and say, "Make me a new Ghostbusters, just fucking do it, it'll sell some tickets probably." And those differences in filmmaking explain why the reboots are almost never as good. There are 3 reboots supposedly coming up in the near future that I am extremely skeptical of. I've read, and I haven't heard much about them lately, but they say that they're trying to reboot The Neverending Story, Labyrinth, and Big Trouble in Little China. Those are 3 movies that are goddamned near unrebootable, and they're 3 beloved films from my childhood. Mostly the first 2. Come on, The Neverending Story. That movie is pure magic. It does not need to be rebooted. You can show your kids the old version. It's still great. A bunch of CGI is never going to replace what was in that movie. You see this right here? This is Falkor. This is what Falkor looks like and sounds like. You cannot replace him. Now, I guess with The Neverending Story, there's a tiny amount of opportunity there. The Neverending Story was based on a German novel, and only the first half of the novel made it into the movie. So if they actually get a talented director who seriously loves the novel and wants to fully realize it in a way that wasn't possible back in the 80s, there's a slim chance it might be a good movie. But this is a very slim chance. And what about Big Trouble in Little China? If you're not familiar with Big Trouble in Little China, it's a wacky karate movie starring Kurt Russell. And the thing is, it's not about the karate, it's not about the fights, it's not even really about the story of, 2 guys trying to rescue a beautiful woman from an evil old sorcerer. Big Trouble in Little China, the essence of the film is this weird, schlocky 80s meat-headed style of humor that is going to be extremely hard to reproduce or surpass in any way. It's the definition of it's its own damn thing. And then, of course, there's Labyrinth, another completely beloved movie from my childhood. How the fuck are you going to reboot Labyrinth? How? This movie was an absolute labor of love by Jim Henson, an artist with a personal vision who pursued it doggedly in spite of everything. All the landscapes, all the puppets, all the creatures, everything. Handmade, beautiful, completely singular. Not to mention, it features an iconic performance by fucking David Bowie, who also did the soundtrack. David Bowie plays Jareth, the villain, in a performance so bizarrely powerful that it caused widespread sexual awakening among the girls of America. Probably among some gay dudes as well, but that's neither here nor there. But David Bowie is dead now, so if they try to reboot Labyrinth, what are they gonna do? Get Zac Efron to play Jareth and have him sing some new songs written by Fall Out Boy? That's going to suck even worse than Ghostbusters. When a movie like Labyrinth, or The Neverending Story, or Big Trouble in Little China is made, or Ghostbusters, there's just a certain magic to it that you can't really just forcibly recreate. They're gonna keep trying, and we're going to keep criticizing them. But hey, if you're younger and you don't see the harm of rebooting Ghostbusters because the old version is old and slow, well, wait a few more years, kids, and you're gonna see what we're talking about. The same thing that happened to us 35-year-old white males is gonna happen to you too. I'd say we have about another 10 years before they completely reboot the Harry Potter franchise. Maybe you're of that exact age where Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone was the first movie you really saw in a theater, and the Harry Potter franchise was the thing you most loved during your adolescence. And here in a few years, they're going to make a new version of the Sorcerer's Stone, and you're going to see the preview and you're going to say, what the fuck? What the fuck is this? I mean, Daniel Radcliffe is Harry Potter to you. Emma Watson is Hermione, and Rupert Grint is Ron. But no, there'll be some newer, younger, sassier actors in their place, and instead of all the slow, boring talking and friendship of the original Harry Potter movies, it'll be just a bunch of wall-to-wall action, monsters, and lightning bolts.
Fuck you.
Which, by then, you'll be tired of that shit. And you'll say, you can't do that. The original Harry Potter movies hold up, they're just as good. They're even better now than when I first saw them. And then, oh yes, then you will understand what we are going through. Buckle up, kiddies. This whole reboot thing, it's not stopping anytime soon.
Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you.
That's Ghostbusters, baby!
Fuck you.